The thing about OneMedical is like interesting to me, and I truly haven't spent enough time looking at it. I've been focused on other things, but I think many people are a little confused about OneMedical's underlying business model and like some of the nuances about it. This is not about like good or bad. It's just kind of like classically how OneMedical has made its money. Being a high-end primary care shop where you have longer appointments and you have nice offices and you have offices in very expensive places tends to mean that you have a much more expensive underlying cost structure than a classic primary care office that you would see in wherever across the country, right? So
Yep.
you have more cost inherently, assuming the docs are paid basically the same, which I think is probably accurate. So OneMedical has like compensated for this underlying cost structure being more expensive, or theoretically compensated for it by doing two things. One is they charge this like subscription fee. It's
Yep.
essentially a yearly fee of I think something like $200 or $250 per person to help cover the cost of the fact that everything is a little more expensive. The other thing they've typically done, which I think is people don't realize, is they've typically aligned themselves with a local hospital system. And they've become essentially affiliated with very expensive healthcare systems like a Mount Sinai in New York. And that allows them to get the rate card that a Mount Sinai or equivalent system gets for reimbursement, meaning they get paid by commercial insurance companies at a higher rate because they're billing underneath the larger hospital system. That's actually the business model, right? Like it's a rate arbitrage with a large healthcare provider who has negotiating leverage. It's not just that
Well, and
fee.
isn't it, everyone says the primary care business is like a wedge, right? Like everything else, primary care doesn't really make any money compared to everything else around the ancillary services for the business, right? And so whenever you looked at the financials of the company, it was always trading at like some stupid revenue multiple compared to like what their profitability was and growth rate was and all that. And it was one of these like the market's so big and you can monetize so many different ways, but they never did.
I mean, look, people talk about like the market is so big, but I would question like, well, which market are we talking about here? Because OneMedical's business model requires people who are willing to pay $200 to $250 a year in a cash fee for access. That basically limits you to major cities across the country right away, right? So you've
Yep.
already like shrunk the market because of this cash component. Plus, there's a brand and consumer expectation that you're going to OneMedical. And they're very nice, by the way. They're very, very nice offices and
I'm
like
sure
it's a
it's
great
wonderful.
service. Wonderful, right?
It's
But
for
that's
like
like,
yuppies, right?
yeah, it's for you and me and Kyle basically to go to
Yeah.
have like OneMedical care. And like it's very nice. But that also, there's an expectation of the office, which means it's more expensive. There's an expectation of the time that the doctors say. So I think this idea of like, well, primary care is big and therefore the market's big is like true, but this is not primary care in the general sense. Like this is a very niche, somewhat bougie primary care that works in major cities and wealthy populations. And it's, it does work, but in those populations. And then it's like like which ancillaries? Because the reality is like most OneMedical members are younger and healthier.
Yeah.
And so they tend to not have the consistent ancillaries you would think of in like a Medicare Advantage population that are 65 and older. And actually most of the like theoretical money to be made in primary care is actually in the Medicare Advantage and Medicare's risk-taking segment, which is 65 and older. And it's this whole totally
Yeah.
different business model about
All the Oak Street and City Block and all that stuff.
Oak Street's probably the best example. There's ChenMed, there's Agilon, there's a few others, but it's not the primary care things most people would know because it's exclusively focused on that Medicare segment. So anyway, I don't know. I'm normally like I see the Amazon strategy, like this is really sharp. It's a market expansion play. You can bring your like cost efficiency structure and analytics to it. You can do real work on this business. Like the Whole Foods thing made a ton of sense to me. This one, I'm not sure I get it yet, but I have to think a little bit more. And a lot of it comes down to it's really an insurance mechanism to get like OneMedical makes its money because of these affiliations with large hospital systems, and that's not
Yeah.
Amazon's game. That's not what they play. Amazon plays direct to consumer cost efficiency. So like, what's the theory here? I'm not sure.
You know what's funny is we're going to litigate this, and it's so important in the healthcare world or whatever, but it's a $3 billion acquisition by a $1.2 trillion company, So like, it's so small to Amazon that like we actually, I mean, sure, it seems it's big and it's important and, whatever, it should be scrutinized, but the Amazon, like this is a tuck-in acquisition of all tuck-in acquisitions, kind of a flyer on who knows. It could be bundled. If it's bundled with Prime, and it increases Prime stickiness by like a couple basis points, like it's probably accretive to them, right?
I think you pretty much nailed it. Like, that's probably it. It's like, this is such a small bet. We can bundle it up. We can take OneMedical's underlying technology, the appointment booking and medical management and messaging and all that, and maybe we can unbundle it and offer it up as like virtual Amazon care, and we don't have to build the tech stack because it is an annoying, complicated tech stack to build because it's very healthcare specific. So I could see them thinking like, we're going to take the tech and apply it to this national virtual care model that a Prime member gets. That makes sense. That's probably the best. That's probably the best example I've heard so far of somebody walking me through it. So like, yeah, that could be it. But I agree, it's such a small number.
I don't know. I just made that up. Look at you though, us getting you finally to talk about healthcare on this with a mic behind your face. It's it took us long enough here. But Kyle, thanks for joining.